Hello and welcome to the TechRaptor podcast. We are here again for another week. My name is Andrew Stretch. I am the host editor again for this week. Once again, we're without Scrappy, but with me today is
Rutledge Doggett, site founder.
Austin Soother, staff writer.
excellent. Yeah, we've got Austin on today. It's been a big week of new games coming out. We were going to try to have Sam on, but I think he's nursing a hangover somewhere. And we're going to be chatting Diablo 4 later. But before that, we're not really going to cover as much news this week. What we are going to have a discussion about is game preservation. As I'm sure anyone on Twitter is aware, everyone's reminding everyone that the WiiU and 3DS eShop are shutting down officially as of the 27th of March. So, from when you're listening to this, you've got a little bit over a week. With that, kind of the stipulations of it will be that you can download and re-download previously purchased items, but anything new you will not be able to purchase. That means that there's going to be a lot of games and features that will be locked to the Wii U ecosystem. There's definitely there's hundreds of thousands of smaller games. Some of the bigger games that immediately come to mind for me is stuff like the Wind Waker HD, which came with all kinds of quality of life improvements, as well as, for the Pokemon collector that you all know I am, a whole load of Pokemon game, including the first two generations on Virtual Console, and also the ability to transfer them forward to current games. If if you've already got the Pokemon Bank on your 3DS and you've got the Poke Transfer tool, you're fine. Um, but if you don't have those downloaded, then that entire amount of connectivity is gone. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that an entire library of a lot of digital games will just kind of be inaccessible. Well, will be legally inaccessible in like a week.
I didn't even think of that Pokemon point you brought up, which is insane to me considering just how big Pokemon is.
Mhm.
And knowing you and other Pokemon collectors, that's gotta be the thing to have. And I need to do it now too, honestly.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get Gen 1, Gen 2 Pokemon and everything in later versions, but within the first 2 hours of a Gen 1 Pokemon game, you can glitch yourself a Mew and transfer that all the way up to your bank and play it in games that are out right now. Everyone's still holding out hope for a virtual console release, and I know that Christian and I were huffing that copium for a Pokemon Day announcement for it, but that did not come to pass. So it's gonna be gone.
Yep. And it's going to keep getting worse too as we move into this kind of digital age. It was interesting to see Doug from Limited Run was tweeting the other day about kind of their improvements in their process of manufacturing and shipping games, which has been an issue. Like my Knights of the Old Republic took a year to get to me. Um, but he was talking, and there were some developers that were chiming in as well in terms of like physical releases and how um, stores like Best Buy and a lot of the big box stores that you've been able to just kind of walk into and get games are starting to slow down their spending on purchasing them because they just sit on shelves and eventually they just discount them. So the primary source of physical releases is starting to dwindle. And so a lot of developers were talking about how they see a lot more value in limited runs, um, which longer term may be the only way to preserve games as we move more and more towards digital. I mean, I can't think of the last time outside of purchasing a copy that has our name on it, the last time I've purchased a physical game. and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of others. It's convenience, and with that convenience, we lose that kind of ability to keep things longer.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm a bit of a boomer, I guess, when it comes to games. I like to go into GameStop or Best Buy and just pick them up physical because one, it's a serotonin boost just to have it in your hands. At least for me. And two, I know that one day I'm not gonna be able to access them if I really wanted to. Probably never going. I don't really replay a lot of games, but if I were to want to play and I couldn't, I'd be really upset, especially if I spent full price on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an odd place to be. I've been primarily when I had my PS2, I was well, obviously all physical, and I bought a lot of games. I still buy and play a lot of games. Um, but for me, moving was always the most difficult part in relation to my large PS2 collection. So I've now got, I used to have 100 and something PS2 games, 200 something PS2 games. And then with moving, it was just, especially across hemispheres, it's just not feasible to move 150 game cases. So I've whittled down to like my best of hits, like small binder, which honestly is mostly just Square Enix games, The Simpsons Hit and Run, and some Dragon Ball Z games. um, but I can definitely see the benefit in wanting that physical connection for the replay value. We definitely are. We do get lucky, and I know that some people hate on the number of like ports or remasters that we get, especially as it's we're getting them so frequently. We've just come off Resident Evil 4 remake getting pushed out, as well as like Dead Space got its remake. But there are some people who do prefer to play the original for one reason or another. Um, but also, there's so many smaller games that are just going to be absolutely lost to obscurity.
Unless you want to play or pay scalper prices on Mercari or eBay or something. I mean, you could go physical, but again, it's like so expensive that there's really no point.
It's the
Yeah,
same
But
way with you know, film media as well at this point. Like you can't find DVDs or Blu-rays or anything of older shows without kind of really shelling out because they've become collector's items. And so I think we'll continue to see it with gaming. I mean, there's a whole industry built around buying and reselling older titles. Um, so I think that'll continue to pick up as a way of preservation, but at the same time, those will be collector's titles in terms of they'll be in probably a plastic box, graded, and never played. And that's where things get tricky and where, much as Nintendo hates to admit it, emulation comes in to be able to, introduce people to games they have no access to. Um, that's how I've been able to replay games that I literally can't play anymore, like Azure Dreams and stuff like that.
are you admitting to emulation, Rut?
Yes.
Oh God,
I
it's all over
think
for you.
well,
No,
well, to an extent, Nintendo is on board with emulation as long as they're the ones doing it. As early as the when the 3DS first started putting out their virtual title console, their virtual console titles. Um, I remember there was an exploit you could do way back in the day that if you put a Game Boy or a Game Boy Advance ROM file on the SD card and navigated to a certain website on your browser, it would like the website would do the equivalent of loading the emulator from a virtual console title that you own, but load it with the ROM file from your SD card, and it would just work. And then we've
Interesting.
also seen
Ooh.
that as recently as like 3 or 4 weeks ago when the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance games came to Nintendo Switch Online, and again, a modder just like plucked out the ROM file that was in the emulation wrapper, put in they specifically put in like Pokemon Red, and then not only did the game run and run flawlessly, but because the emulation wrapper was what was in charge of everything to do with connectivity, you could trade. There was like nothing extra that he needed to do. The emulation wrapper knew like, oh, this Game Boy game is trying to chat with that Game Boy game. We can do that over wireless. So definitely like Nintendo's ability to emulate a whole bunch more. Because I mean, we're talking about the Wii U and the 3DS. How many Game Boy or Game Boy Advance games are lost out there?
Yeah.
And we still don't have emulators for GameCube and Wii. I would love to play some GameCube games, but the prices again are insane. But that's kind of I think emulating GameCube is a lot more difficult, isn't it? And Nintendo likes to
Well,
keep it simple.
yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, it's definitely possible for the Switch to play a GameCube game because they got Super Mario Sunshine running
Yeah, that's true.
as part of the very short-lived Mario 3D All Stars package. Speak about talking about game preservation. Let's release 3 of the greatest Mario games for a year and then cut them off at the knees.
They did that with Fire Emblem, the original. The only localized version of the first game was a limited time digital release, and now you can't get it.
That's wild.
Well,
Yeah, there's
unless you get it on the Japanese eShop, but then it's not localized, so it's like
yeah,
it's weird.
adds a whole different hurdle. Was that on Switch or was that like 3DS or earlier?
Yeah, it was Switch. If you buy the 30th anniversary edition, you get a code, or you could download it on the eShop for like a year or something.
Wild.
And now it's gone. Yeah.
That's truly unreal.
Yeah.
To just that I think begins to fall into um like emulation for the sake of emulation. Like when Metroid Dread first released and we started seeing, there was like that one company that put out an article that was like, PC is the best place to play Metroid Dread. Look at how great this emulator is. And it's like, guys, what the fuck are you doing? Like, games
Yeah.
just come out. It's very easy to drop $60. Just play it on your Switch. Just that's it. Play it on your Switch. But when it comes to games that either the company that makes them are not putting them somewhere or not selling them, or the company that owns the rights doesn't exist anymore and there's like zero way to get that back. Some of these games have the avenues for scalpers. But as you've said, like, do you really want to be paying $300 for a single SNES game because it's like a really good SNES game? But it does make things difficult and kind of blurs that gray line even further of like, well, if there's zero way to do this whatsoever, then what are the options?
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like Nintendo is using fear of missing out to like get as many people to buy uh Fire Emblem and Mario as possible, and then like, all right, that's all we're gonna do for it. I don't know, it's
Mhm.
just weird.
I
So
I I think there's also a missed revenue opportunity in all this too.
Yeah.
I obviously there's the scalpers market in terms of buying and selling older games, but there's also this huge kind of uplift in the last couple of years of people wanting to play older games and there not being enough to meet that demand. Specific titles that people are looking for or or just really a lack of backwards compatibility. I mean, we've also seen Microsoft start to pull titles off the backwards compatibility list, which has been interesting. Um,
They were pushing that really heavy too.
Mhm.
in recent years.
So I'll be curious. There's a lot of hurdles that come with emulation on different hardware for sure. But I think if they can figure it out, that's the only path to long-term preservation is the primary console manufacturers finding ways for you to access these games, paid or not, that you wouldn't be able to play otherwise. Because 20 years from now, the games that are 20 years old for us are going to be 40 years old, and they're going to be even harder to get. So, people our age and younger that may want to introduce their kids or family members to an older title they played as a kid is just going to be that much harder.
Austin, as a collector, do you know what kind of the approximate shelf life of a CD or of a cartridge is? Because there's got to be a point of degradation, right?
Yeah, I don't have like a lot of old CDs. I know that recently, actually, on Reddit, somebody was complaining about how one of their CDs from like PS2 era or something, there's like an outer layer coating on the bottom of the CD where it's red, and it
Mhm.
starts to degrade. And I don't know if that has to do with because they're not preserving it in the right condition,
Mm.
or environment, or it just happens. But I have a feeling that eventually it's just going to happen. It Probably cartridges age better if I were to guess. Um, you just blow on it and put it in and it's good. As long as the contacts are as long as the contacts are still good, I have a feeling that you can clean it off or whatever. If not, and it's good to go. Um,
Cartridges had internal batteries too, didn't they?
yeah, and you can replace them, although I know there's some issues with like Game Boy stuff, and I guess at the end of the day, uh, everything has a shelf life, you know,
Mm.
even digital games, but it just depends on how long you want to hold on to them.
Yeah, I mean, by the same vein, if someone was to say, "I'm gonna download the full library of PS2 games and keep it on this hard drive," it's like, well, that will also decay.
Yeah.
Um, Man, for the guy who's complaining about like the bottom of his PS2, I can totally imagine him being like, I don't know what the problem is. It was sitting on the floor in my air conditioned garage in Florida. It survived 3 hurricanes. Why couldn't I? Why can't I play this game now?
Yeah.
So one man has taken it upon himself to purchase every single Wii U and 3DS game. Gerard, the completionist, purchased them all, which I guess means that
Absolute madman.
Yeah.
he's going to be the one person who will be able um, to go and re-download whatever he wants. um, Clocked in the Wii U library for him. I'm not 100% sure if he was factoring in things that he had previously purchased or not, or if this was like the digital only options. Um, but the Wii U library was $9,673, and the 3DS version, 3DS library was 13,118.
Did he say
And
how long it took him? Because I know there's not a buy all button.
yeah, that was going to be the next thing that I said. Is I'm not familiar. I'm not as familiar with the Wii U store, but I know that 3DS is like one purchase at a time. Um, that that would have. I mean, if we were to do some quick math, if we were to say at this point, if 3DS games were normally $40, let's say an average would be $20. Would that be a generous?
Yeah.
So that's about 656 games that he had to go and one by one purchase.
I feel like you need a team to do that just so that you don't lose sanity.
That's what interns are for.
Yeah.
I mean, would you even be able to do that as a team? Because I don't think that you
No, you
can you
take
purchase
shifts,
the.
you know?
Okay, yeah.
6 interns doing 4-hour shifts or whatever.
you need to do like the equivalent of games done quick, but games bought quick, like 24/7 for a whole week. We are gonna be purchasing 3DS games.
WiiU eShop any percent.
God.
Gerard said that this was also the most expensive video he's done, which I understand since it's about
Not shocking.
$22,000 or so. What's also interesting is that the whole library together, I think for both combined on the 3DS, it's like, what was it, 1.2
1.2
terabytes?
terabytes.
Yeah, and that's
That's
like
it.
one download of Warzone. Isn't that crazy?
I think, yeah.
That's true.
No, that's not much. That is like 10 to 12 modern AAA games
Yeah.
Yep.
for the entirety of
Well,
that.
now that's being generous. I think we're again Warzone, maybe 2 downloads.
Warzone's like
It's
400
a
gigs or something. It's insane.
is it?
Yeah, it's
Jesus
massive.
Christ.
Yeah,
Why?
because it's
That
big, I guess. Compression just doesn't work. I don't know.
It's a compression thing from what I remember. Yeah, they don't put a whole lot. They know people are going to download it, so why bother working on compression?
oh man.
I guess it's
You have to
worth considering that Nintendo's pretty good with compression. Although these games are a bit older, and
yeah.
definitely the 3DS doesn't have a lot of capacity. But still, like 1.2 terabytes is not a lot.
Mm.
His next video is going to be that, he's figured out how to mod an NVMe into his 3DS. Just have everything stored on there regardless.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's wild. So, yeah, I mean, we've seen some companies doing a good job with their digital preservation. Limited run companies like that are doing a good job with the physical preservation, and there's also all kinds of organizations out there as well that are trying to digitally preserve as many games as possible. I'm definitely foreseeing, 20 years in the future, me talking to a youngin and saying, "Oh, I remember playing this game." They're gonna look at me like I'm crazy as they pull down their Oculus VR 28 and then go into a full dive sensory game.
Yeah, old Stretch will be like, "This Mew has been with me longer than you've been born, son."
I I do actually have I have a Swampert that has been with me since I got Pokemon Ruby for my birthday the year that it launched. It's like a 13 or 14-year-old Swampert just living in my cell phone.
Well, it came out in 2003, if I recall, so that's a 2-decade-old Swampert, isn't it?
Yeah. 2002,
Sheesh.
2003. Yeah, so I've got a 20-year-old Swampert that's just sitting on my mobile phone that I like sometimes go back and look at and just be like, "Jeez, you've, you've been around."
uh,
It lasted longer than Babylon's Fall.
ooh.
Yeah, I think most things do.
Yeah, most Pokemon at this point.
Radical
That's
Heights
wild.
lasted longer than Babylon's Fall.
Oh man.
Rut, that game, man. You gotta just let it go.
I'm not letting it go. Not letting it go.
So any other thoughts that you guys have for, digital preservation, physical preservation, kind of what the game landscape will look like in 20, 40 years?
I just hope it gets better.
Mm.
That companies figure out a way to make a lot of these games more accessible because there's tons of titles personally I'd love to go back and replay, but it's just too much effort at the moment.
I'll keep
Any
buying.
titles that immediately come to mind, Rut?
Azure Dreams is probably the biggest one. That was one I played a lot on PS1 when I was younger. That I've had trouble emulating. I could never get the settings right for it not to like stutter or do weird stuff. Um, I mean, they brought Dark Cloud to PS4, which is one of my favorites as well. But there's a handful of probably titles that I would jump on if if I had the opportunity. Um, you know, Mega Man Legends is probably a good one too. Good example.
Yeah, getting Legends and Legends 2 would be awesome. Still
Yeah,
sad we didn't get Legends 3.
if you told me that they are on PS5 right now, I would literally get off of this podcast and go buy a PS5. So make it happen.
And for you, Austin?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep buying physical, and honestly, every day I regret as a kid selling like my old games to GameStop just to get some extra cash.
Get
Um,
$2.
yeah, I still hit myself over selling Fire Emblem Path of, or no, Radiant Dawn, the one on the Wii. It goes for like $150 now. I just want it because it's one of my favorite games, but I can't. And I probably sold the games up for like $20 or something, which is just terrible. But now that I actually have a consistent income, I want to buy my games and keep them so that I don't have those regrets again. Um, but it seems like those days are kind of going away now with everything becoming digital.
This is why everyone needs a console bag. It's
Oh
just
God.
it's so integral to have a giant bag that you keep somewhere with a whole bunch of old consoles in it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm all for it.
So, moving on from talking about some of the older games that we loved to play and the dire situation that they're in, you guys have both been absolutely loving the Diablo 4 open beta, if I've been reading Slack correctly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us about it. How's it going?
Well, I'll spoil the headline for my upcoming coverage. I think it's something like I'm going to lose so many hours of my life to Diablo 4. Um, because it is truly massive. Even as a beta, you can just see that the scale of it is going to consume a lot of players' lives, completionists. Yeah, I'm really excited to see the final product, and I don't know. What do you think so far, Rut?
I mean, I have been looking for an isometric RPG that would click with me for a while, probably since Diablo 3, honestly. And just there hasn't been anything. I mean, you and I've talked about Torchlight 3, Superfuse, which is a smaller one that released recently, is intriguing, but it just didn't have the staying power for me. Whereas in my 2 days of playing the beta, I keep wanting to go back. And for me, that's pretty big. Usually, if I bounce off a game, I bounce off a game, and that's it. But the systems of Diablo 4 are solid. And I played Immortal for a week, and it kind of just bounced off. It was just too much. It was overwhelming in terms of how much stuff you could do. But
You
the
didn't want to spend
systems,
$255,000?
yeah, exactly. And like the systems of Diablo 4 are simple yet complex, and I just see that there's going to be a lot of replayability in terms of um different world difficulties, different um tons of different dungeons. I like the fact that I think the one thing that kind of took me by surprise or that I thought was interesting was the different dungeons that are littered throughout the map. If you complete them, you get an aspect, but it's not an aspect necessarily for your class. Like you can run a dungeon and get an aspect for the necromancer class, and then jump over to that class and apply it. So there's kind of there's incentives to doing everything, um, more so than probably any other one I've played before.
Yeah, like again, the scale of the map is insane. What's interesting to me, coming from having played a lot of Diablo 3, is that the map doesn't seem to be randomly generated and
Mm.
or procedurally generated, I should say. Probably the spawn placements of enemies are, but the entire world is like baked into the game.
Yep.
Uh, but even then, it's like so big that it's probably not going to make a difference. And I'd also be interested to know if the dungeons are random or not, because um, I think that was like the coolest aspect is just like coming across a different dungeon every time in Diablo 3.
Hmm.
Um, so I'll be interested to see that. I'm also already thinking about like how the end game will be. I'm really hoping that and I don't know if any of you guys did this, but like greater rifts in Diablo was the end game, and it's basically just taking on like tons and tons of enemies at the same time as fast as you can, going through a dungeon and then killing a boss at the end. And the enemy density is just like insane in these things. Um, and yeah, I guess another thing I wanted to bring up was difficulty. I don't know. Were you playing on the easier or harder difficulty, Rut?
Harder.
Yeah. So does it feel to you like the game is actually harder than Diablo 3 when you played it the first time?
Not so much. I've definitely gotten my ass handed to me in a couple of dungeons.
Yeah.
To where it took me like 5, 6, 7 tries to get the final boss down. Because it is, I mean, for lack of a better comparison, it's very WoW like in terms of
Mhm.
there are phases to the bosses, there are different mechanics to their abilities, and if you're not playing in a way that if you're just trying to just hack them down, it's not going to work. You've got to kind of time your moves, you've got to time your dodges. Um, so it's definitely a challenge.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think that was probably the thing that clicked the most for me is being like, holy shit, this is kind of like raiding in WoW, to where I've got to pay attention to what I'm doing throughout that fight.
Yeah, that's where I was getting at. I think the difficulty really shows in these dungeons, particularly with the bosses, because I in Diablo 3, usually you could just like stand still and hack away at them and they just die, but you actually have like a dodge move now, and you know, you really can't just run into them and face roll it. So I like it, and I think it also incentivizes some group content even more now, which I haven't really dived into, but I think it'll be a lot of fun with friends.
I haven't either, but I do like that. I think the reason the map is probably static is because of the multiplayer aspect.
Hmm.
It was kind of nice to like, oh, there's an event over there, and you run over, and it's kind of Destiny like where people just start jumping in. Um, which I thought was nice. I mean, that was something that like Defiance and Rift and a couple other MMOs did to where it was, there would be this big event and everybody rushes over to complete it. Um, and that adds a different social aspect to it. So for me, I'll be curious to kind of the clan system and how it factors into end game because that is typically what will draw me in and keep me in a game more than anything is kind of the relational side. It's the reason we were talking about this, I think, on a recent podcast. It's the reason why I played WoW for as long as I did was
Hmm.
the community. So if there's a solid community built around the clan system and end game and stuff like that, I can see this one having staying power.
Yeah. Well, now I know in Diablo 3 they were like communities or like kind of guilds, but it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel as intimate, and also you can only have three other people with you at the same time. Um, what's interesting is that, like you said, you can see other players out in the world, and then there's also world bosses, which
Mhm.
coming from WoW, it reminds me a lot of that, where just a bunch of players can come in. I don't know just how many can, but a lot more than just four can go and kill this world boss. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I haven't killed the world boss yet, but I think it's like a big community event kind of thing. So
That'll be cool. I think that was a big thing with Lost Ark too that made it interesting was having just a bunch of people Zergrush a boss for the most part.
yeah.
Um, so I'll be interested to see that.
So it kind of sounds like they've taken. I mean, as I played a fair bit of Diablo 3 when it hit consoles.
Mhm.
I didn't really hop into it for PC. Um, and I was definitely like aware of all of the support and how definitely once it like hit the Xbox release version, that was kind of what people were very much heralding as like the best way to play Diablo 3, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, but it sounds like from what you guys are chatting, they've kind of taken um, they've kind of very much taken an MMORPG approach to it. Maybe the world isn't as massive, but between like world bosses and instance raids and more complex boss fights and stuff, um, it sounds like they've kind of nailed down something that has you guys hooked.
Yeah. I'm with Austin. I'm probably gonna lose a lot of time to this. And I was worried after playing Immortal. I was very worried about this. Granted, we're not in the end game, so we don't really know
Mm.
if there is any level of monetization, and I'm sure there will be cosmetically. Um, but I think they probably know that if they do a level of pay to win like they did with Immortal, it will kill the community. Um, you know, real money auction house. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've said that there's a battle pass. And if I
There is
recall,
like if you purchase the deluxe, you get it. I think.
yeah, and I think it's all cosmetics, but again, I could be wrong. I just know that if they do the same thing as they do with Diablo Immortal, or really any sort of pay to win aspect to it, that's gonna turn me off, which is really unfortunate because the game is seems very good so far.
Yeah.
As for people who have played Diablo 3, who are getting into Diablo 4 or are looking to get into it, kind of what are some of the things that they'll find familiar, and what are some of the things that you think have like really improved, where they've like raised the bar?
I've been thinking about this, and it feels to me like it's a mix of both Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. Like they have the theme and atmosphere of Diablo 2, which is a lot darker and
Mhm.
grittier, as opposed to Diablo 3's cartoonish visuals. And then gameplay wise, it feels like maybe it's a bit more fast paced, like Diablo 3, um, in terms of abilities and like I guess the way you pick them. I didn't really like Diablo 2's way of doing that. Um, so I think that even if players didn't like Diablo 3, coming from Diablo 2, they'll enjoy it for the atmosphere at the very least, and then Diablo 3 players will find it pretty easy to pick up. I don't know. I played a lot of it, and I haven't really had any trouble with the abilities and just like overall gameplay loop.
It's kind of, if you're a Diablo fan, you'll like
I mean,
it.
yeah, and that's probably like the best case scenario in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean, especially it's been so many years since Diablo 3 to have a sequel come out, and the praise is, it's Diablo but better.
Yeah.
Are there any key features or anything, Rut, that you're really feeling bring you back to Diablo 3?
I mean, it for me, it's kind of there's a lot to do in terms of they give you the options of dungeons and cellars and this massive map to explore. And I haven't and as you progress, you're meeting new enemies. So there's not a whole lot of repetition yet. Obviously, if you're leveling each class, there's going to be a level of repetition. And I was talking with somebody over the weekend um, that is playing a different class, and that class has a different system than mine in terms of
Mm,
as a barbarian, I've got expertise. So as I use a type of weapon more and more, I get bonuses for using it. And there's a class quest associated with it, and it's on my map, and it says I can do it. But if I run towards it, it warps me back to the main place. So I don't really know how that's going to work yet. But so
interesting.
far, the kind of versatility of that class has been nice. The ability to, um, in those first 15 levels, respec regularly as I kind of figure out like what I like is also nice. Um, because I think that based on the abilities, there's going to be a lot of min maxing you can do. Um, a lot, and once you start to factor in like different gear properties and
Hmm.
gems and all that stuff, I think there's going to be a pretty high level of depth that I haven't really felt from a game since I played, retail WoW, when it was pre-classic. Um, it There's going to be a lot, and I think that for me, that gear drop mechanic is always very satisfying. And Diablo 4 doesn't make it feel like too much. Like I think with when I was playing through Super Fuse, it was just like armor drop, armor drop, armor drop, armor drop, and it's all trash.
Mhm.
Whereas it's much more limited in Diablo, or at least in Diablo 4, to where they feel like meaningful drops, even if it's not a gear upgrade. I can salvage it and it becomes a transmog item. Um, or I'm getting a purple drop or a yellow drop, so on and so forth. It's My inventory isn't filled up in 5 minutes. And to me, that makes the gear more meaningful rather than just like a thing to get money, um, and having to run back to the city over and over again to sell and then go back out. And there's not this constant interruption. So I think that gameplay loop is very sound and is going to be the thing that really draws people in.
So, Rut, you're playing Barbarian. What class are you playing?
I'm also playing Barbarian.
Well, then.
I love my whirlwind.
Yeah.
You did mention like there's a unique aspect to every class. So like the barbarian has the different weapons. You can actually allocate what weapon you use for these skills. I'm pretty sure, and that you can like tweak your skills to so like if you're using dual wield, they do more damage or whatever. That's a very simple way of putting it. I know other classes, the Necromancer, which is in the beta, you can customize your like undead army, which is really cool. That's their special mechanic.
Interesting.
Rogues can choose like a specialization. So I think probably like ranged versus melee, basically.
Hmm.
And I don't know what the druids are, but and like sorceress or whatever can like enchant and alter their gear a bit more than other classes. So I think there's a bit more nuance in the classes this time around, which um
It's not
I
purely just a skill tree.
yeah, in Diablo 3 you would have ability unlocks and then runes, and that was very, very simple. So I think they take a bit more of a Diablo 2 approach, I guess, but um it still
A little
feels
bit more
familiar.
granular upgrades.
Yeah, I mean, everything still feels familiar to me, which is great. So, again, like something for every Diablo fan, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about min maxers and stuff. If you can allocate different weapons to different special attacks, or get down to more more nitty gritty customization of your gear, some people are going to have field days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Just
like,
like,
thankfully, in Diablo 2, you only have like two respecs. Like, you could only respec twice, I'm pretty sure, or three times.
Mhm.
Um, Thankfully, in Diablo 4, you can do it as much as you like, so you can experiment.
It's very similar to WoW in that you can respec over and over again. The cost just continues to go up,
okay,
for those respecs. But yeah, I mean, I've gone from legitimately worried about this release and whether it was going to be good to like actively looking forward to it. I think most Diablo fans, once they get into, I mean, I think the hardcore fans are definitely already in the beta. They
yeah,
pre-ordered.
they're already playing. We're
Um,
not worried about them.
yeah, but the people who've been on the fence and aren't worried, I think once they get into the open beta, it's going to be a oh shit, I'm actually really excited for this,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
which is refreshing.
And so,
Well,
how many classes are there in total, and how many are there in the beta?
I
I think there's going to be five at launch, and there's three right now.
Barbarian,
Okay.
sorcerer, rogue, necromancer,
Druid.
druid. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are those, because you also talked about how you get like aspects for different ones of them. If you start up, is it that you can swap your class, or that you just like have a new character for a different
You
class?
they're separate characters. You're locked in. Yeah. And you can customize them too, which is kind of cool, like appearance wise.
Oh,
Um
okay.
So
like
that's
true
nice.
customer or customization.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine that like you would probably be able to get some like later game. Is it just aspects or other equipment that you can get for other classes?
I think I've only gotten loot for my own class, but in Diablo
Okay.
3 it would drop
I've gotten
not
loot for other
as
classes.
have you? Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Um
because yeah, I know for people who want to get to end game with different classes, having that rubber banding of being able to catch up to your main class faster is always appreciated.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I didn't
Had a couple
care because
yellows drop for rogue and sorcerer, I think.
do
Hmm.
you know if there's a stash? I'm pretty sure there
There
is.
is.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
just
dropped
like
them in the
a
stash.
yeah, it's like a collected bank for all your characters. So, if you find something really good for a druid when you're playing as the barbarian, then you can just put it in there and pick it up as your druid later.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of I think that Blizzard gets the mentality behind alts. I think that clicks a lot here. I really like I said earlier, I really like the ability to be able to go and do a dungeon and unlock an aspect that I can then use um on another character. It kind of adds value to doing everything, and um, maybe you're leveling your barbarian, but your necromancer's already fully leveled. But you forgot to do this one dungeon, so you can go and do that, and then swap back over to your other class and use that to enchant your equipment. It's a very nice thing for people who want to play through every single class.
And also just for those, like I'm someone who always gets like analysis paralysis in leveling up a character. So many RPGs I played when I was younger, I would get to the final boss and would look at my stats and be like, this is garbage for what I need. I've done everything wrong. Why have I only put things into health and physical attack? What am I doing? That to be able to respec as much as you need with an increased price, but also kind of the rubber banding of alt characters. It's like you can't make a wrong choice.
Yeah.
Play the game, have fun. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly there's going to be an optimal way to build your
Mhm.
characters, but I don't think you're restricted to that. Me personally, I kind of like looking up builds from like the guides and making them as powerful as possible. But if you're playing casually or maybe even uh, not, I think you'll be fine.
Hmm.
Just find
Yeah.
something that works for you, and you're good.
Now,
There's enough option, but there's also a limiting factor. Like there's only 20-ish abilities for the most part, so you can't
okay.
screw up too badly. And the ability to respec is so easy that even if you do something and realize, wow, I really suck, you can quickly swap. Um,
So now we've been talking a whole bunch of positives. Are there any things that you guys have encountered that that have left you desiring more?
Certainly, people have had their fair share of server issues, which I think is to
Mm.
be expected, since there are a lot of people
Code
coming in.
37, baby.
Yeah, personally, I've only disconnected once, and I could get right back in afterwards. So I know that's not the norm for a lot of people,
Mhm.
but I think it's been pretty smooth, and uh, this beta test is going to make things better for launch because Blizzard will know what the servers are going to be like. Um, other than I guess like one of the weird downsides for me is the UI seems a little I don't know. I get some like mobile vibes from it almost, which put I get PTSD from Diablo Immortal, but I mean overall I don't really have many true complaints so far. Uh I hope the UI just gets a little bit of work to make it look better.
Oh,
I don't have
interesting.
anything I hate yet.
I just looked up the HUD because I hadn't seen it yet. I definitely get what you're talking about. Also, the very top video that suggests to me is how to change HUD position.
Mm.
So I don't know whether that might be something that's helpful.
Yeah. It's not so much the position as it is just the look. And there are also a
Mhm.
couple like menus, like the social menu and stuff that just I don't know. I'm kind of spoiled by WoW. I feel like they have that done really well, and again it reminds me too much of Diablo Immortal. The same menus.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I did see, on speaking of like the server disconnects and stuff, I saw there was an image floating around on Twitter of like a negative review or a negative post on the support forums complaining about, how dare the game have disconnects. It's like we're paying to be in a beta or something, and it's like, well, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
This
That's
this
I
is
mean,
I think this is their opportunity to get as many people in and fix things pre-launch. Like,
yeah, I mean this kind of test is exactly the one that developers do to figure out server load.
Yeah.
I'm sure that
how
there's
is the
been some
server gonna
poor I'm
work?
sure that there's
Like,
been some poor network dev in the background like spin up more. We need more. Keep them
yeah,
cranking.
Well, it's also worth noting that this is the closed beta. I think starting maybe tomorrow, or in the next few days at least, it's going to open the floodgates for everybody, not just the people that bought KFC or
yeah,
or
next Friday.
pre-ordered it.
Oop.
So yeah, that is going to be the true test, and I think I would not be too surprised if there was some more disconnects there.
Mhm.
And the queue times. Apparently, people were waiting something like I don't
I had
know.
90-minute queues on
Yeah,
Friday. Yeah.
which
Wow.
I don't know. Coming from WoW is not terrible for a launch, but still, you kind of like once you're off of work, you want to play, and now you have to wait an hour and a half. Is just not great.
Well, that's the perfect time as you're waiting for Diablo 4 to load. Pull out your phone, get Diablo Immortal going,
Yeah.
and then you've got the
Double down.
perfect way to spend your time.
Yeah, perfect.
I see no problem. I mean, you guys have phones, right?
Oh my
They're
god.
never gonna live that down, are they?
No,
No. I
no.
yeah,
It's too
no, there
funny.
always needs to be someone to bring them back to that. So, with that, I think that will be about it. Are there any other last thoughts that you guys want to share on Diablo 4? Or just it's good
I think
if you want to
I
give
think
a well, I
if
guess.
you were worried at all, um, definitely check out the open beta next weekend. I think a lot of my fears have been dissuaded, and it clicked a lot better than I thought it would. I thought that I was going to, I don't know, maybe I was overly negative going into it, but I think that I went from, well, we'll see, to just really, really looking forward to this launch.
Mm,
Um, and it's something that's been in the works for so long and that gamers have been waiting for so long that I just hope that everything past level 25 lives up to what we're expecting.
mhm,
Yeah, definitely go into it with some skepticism, just because I guess it's always healthy to have some of that for like a live service game such as this. But if you're on the fence, you don't really have an excuse. Just wait for the open beta because it's free. Play it, see
Mhm.
if you like it. If not, no big deal.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, just look forward to the launch, I guess, in July, something like that.
I thought it was like June, right?
Maybe June. Either way, I'm excited personally. Um, and if you play the beta,
June
I hope you
6th.
find the same.
June 6th will be the release date.
Yeah,
So,
it's coming up.
Yep.
and definitely we don't have an exact time, but we should be expecting to read some of your further thoughts on techraptor.net, I believe.
That's right. I'm doing that, and I just realized I'll be going to E3 when Diablo is in full swing, so that I only have 3 days, no, 2 days to enjoy it before E3,
Oh no.
which I mean, first world problems, right? But still.
Yeah, that's certainly that's certainly up there. Well, that will be it from us here at TechRaptor. looping back to our discussion before, if there's a game that you have not been able to get due to preservation issues that you would love to be able to purchase, um, drop it in the comments below, and we'll take a look at some of those. Um, we have been the TechRaptor podcast. You can check us out, subscribe to us on all of your favorite podcast apps, sites, links. You can check out our website, techraptor.net, for all of the latest in gaming news, reviews, tabletop reviews, guides. I am sure we will have plenty coming out for Diablo 4 when it has full release. So if you're wanting to find the ultimate build, then be sure to check us out. And until then, we will catch you guys next week.